If you're experiencing pain on the inside of your ankle into your foot when you're running, you could be experiencing posterior shin splints. And rest and ice just aren't enough to get you back to pain-free running. They may help in the short term, but we're looking for a long-term solution so you don't have to worry about those shin splints anymore. Today I'm going to take you through 3 exercises that can help you get rid of posterior shin splints so you can return to pain-free running. These exercises are going to progress from easier exercise to a little bit harder of an exercise. All you're going to need is a ball. I have a lacrosse ball. You can also use a tennis ball. And for the first exercise, we're going to place this ball in between our heels to really focus on that posterior tibialis strength and stability. The posterior tibialis is the key muscle that is dysfunctioning or not working correctly when we have posterior shin splints. And that muscle is really important for arch stability and our push-off while we're running. So grab a ball and you're gonna place it in between your ankles like so. And I'm gonna put my hands against the wall for balance. So I'm gonna be facing away from you. From this position, place your hands on the wall, and then I want you to lift your heels up, pushing through the ball of your foot and your toes as you lift up and down. Now the goal of this exercise is to not drop the ball as we lift up and down, because that means we're pushing our heels into the ball, which is helping to stabilize and contract that posterior tibialis a little bit more than a traditional heel raise. As I mentioned before, that posterior tibialis attaches down the inside of our shin into the arch, and that really helps to allow us to stabilize the arch when we're running. So we need to focus on that arch stability just a little bit more. This exercise is really good with that, and it's called short foot. So all you're going to do, we're gonna have no shoes on, no socks on, put all your weight on that leg, and all you're gonna do is push your toes down into the ground and then pull them back towards your heel. As you do this, you'll see I'm making a little bit of an arch, and then I'll relax out of that movement. Now I have a very flat foot, so you can clearly see that I'm making an arch and then collapsing out of that arch. If you have a higher arch, I want you to focus on, yes, making the arch, stabilizing through the arch, and then I want you to really focus on pushing your arch down as you come out of this movement. Now, if you have a flat foot, I want you to also think about not bringing your foot out to the side and putting your weight on the outside of that foot or the ankle. That's not at all what we want to do. We want to make sure the weight is still evenly distributed as we make an arch and then collapse out of it versus this. See how my ankle's moving out? I'm rolling my ankle out to the side. We don't want that because we're not going to be running like that. So why practice it? So as you make an arch and then collapse out of it, my knee is still facing straight ahead, my hip is still facing straight ahead, everything is still facing straight ahead. It's just a small isolated movement from our arch, and then we'll collapse out of it. Now the progression of this exercise, there's 2 progressions. One, you can hold the arch contraction for 5 to 10 seconds. So you'll contract, hold up to 5 to 10 seconds, and then relax and come out of it. This is really good if this exercise is a little bit more difficult for you and if you're having trouble with that big toe stability. The next progression of this exercise is that we'll make an arch, we'll squat down, we'll come up, and then we'll collapse out of that arch stability or that short foot exercise. So it's kind of like a 2-step progression. So you make short foot, you make the arch, squat down, hold the contraction, and then you relax out of it. Before we move on to exercise number 3, I just want to point out that this exercise is really good for big toe stability too. So if you have a history of plantar fasciitis, or you just keep getting shin splints every time you increase your mileage, I really want you to focus on what your big toe is doing in this exercise. So one common mistake is that runners will just curl their toes like this and say, oh, I'm making an arch. But really, we're not working on that movement pattern where we want to focus on stabilizing through the big toe, which means we are pushing the big toe down into the ground and then pulling it back. Yes, your toes will scrunch a little bit, but they're not curling under your foot. Big difference here. We're not curling our toes when we're running, so we shouldn't be practicing that. Moving on to exercise number 3, we are going into some plyometrics, which means we are gonna work on accepting the load every time we stride. So think about it, when you're running and your foot hits the ground, if you're not able to absorb the shock from the ground, then you're not able to disperse the shock into your lower extremity, up to your hips, your low back, your mid back, and even into your shoulders and neck. So the goal of a lot of shin splint rehab, yes, we are strengthening weaker muscles, but we also want to learn to absorb shock so we can disperse the shock. And one really common reason that we can't absorb shock is that our ankle is really stiff. Think about it, if your ankle is stiff, maybe you've heard runners like this, where it's just, and they're so loud every time they take a step and you're just staring at them like, can you be a little bit quieter? And a lot of the time that's because they don't have the ankle mobility or ankle dorsiflexion as we bring our knee over our toes, so they can't absorb the shock. Look at the difference here. This is an ankle that's really stiff, a little bit louder on impact versus an ankle that is a little bit more mobile and good at absorbing shock. A little bit softer, a little bit more give to the knee, to the ankle, and that's what we want to start focusing on as we transition into plyometrics or jumping exercises. The goal here, yes, we can be focusing on that soleus and calf power, but we also want to focus on absorbing the shock so we can disperse the shock and it's not going all through our shin, causing an inflammatory response that is causing us pain. So this exercise, I call a 2-to-1 frog jump. It really is just focusing on landing on one leg. So we're gonna jump off both legs into a little bit of a broad jump, which means we're jumping out. And then we're gonna land on one leg and do this with a nice and controlled motion. A quiet land is the goal. And as you do this, you can start to pick up and even compare side to side. Does one side feel louder? Is one side a little bit harder to stick the landing? And as we do this, I want you to do it in barefoot too. And you can start to focus as you keep doing this rep after rep. Am I able to get quieter? Am I able to start bending my knee a little bit more and really giving into that landing versus it just being like this? You know, with our knees straight, our knees not really going over our toes. We want to really focus on quiet landing, absorb the shock. Even if the pain is only on the inside of your ankle, I still want you to strengthen other aspects of your ankle with shin splints. So if you want more rehab exercises, go through this video next. It's going to give you a couple different more rehab exercises that's going to address more of that anterior shin as well as the medial shin and even the posterior ankle as well.